Fireside wisdom in three, two.
Hey everybody, welcome to Fireside Wisdom. I'm Paul Rickards, here with Tim Berzins and Kylie Reinhold. We're here today to have a conversation about self-worth, and we hope that these conversations remain inspiring, relatable, and inspirational. To say inspire twice. So great intro, Paul.
I'll add that this is a special episode because it's a full moon today. So we are in the energy of the intensity of the full moon. All of your emotions and patterns are illuminated in the light of the moon. So it's a fun way to make sure that we're actually on point with our conversations and that we're being authentic and true, because there's a lot of energy in the air right now. And I think that's a good time to do a conversation. So.
Absolutely. I am affected by the lunar cycle. I used to think it was bullshit, and I was like, that's nonsense. Like, stuff like that doesn't affect me at all. It's horseshit. But as it turns out, I've monitored it over the last couple of years, and I do recognize that lunacy is a real thing. Like, I get, like, mental sometimes during a heavy moon cycle, and depending on what time of year it is, it affects me differently. But right now, I just feel very kind of flat. That's kind of like the energy, and just kind of tired. And sometimes I can feel really, like, irritable and obnoxious, but obnoxious isn't abnormal for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say. What you mean only with the full moon?
I'm a diva. What can I say? It is known. It's fun. But self-worth is a topic today, and I think I'll kick things off with it. But for me, it's always been a journey of recognizing that we are always more than what we think we are sometimes. Like, even when at our lowest points, there are opportunities for growth and there are opportunities to explore ourselves. And it's only been really in the last few years where I've recognized that there's really a whole lot of like untapped potential that I have in recognizing my self-worth and knowing when good things are coming, that they are for me and that I'm allowed to receive good things, and that when struggles come, it's an opportunity for me to step up and use my power and use my abilities and strengths and my qualities, and ask for help when I need to ask for help, and draw upon the potent individuals that I have in my life. I'm very lucky to have in my life. And I think that we have so many great examples of people around us that exude confidence and exude, admirable qualities that we want to emulate. Like, we see a person being very successful, like, man, I wish I had that sometimes, when we're in our head and in our small self, is to use your term, a small s, small. And I do that. I do try to seek out successful personalities, but I try not to copy them, because I'm trying to find myself in that and recognize if those qualities are things that are really me, and being authentic about it and genuine. And I think that it's hard to do sometimes, to be objective with yourself and be able to look in the mirror and say, hey, am I putting something on? Is this false confidence? Is this more of a mask that I'm putting on, rather than me integrating my power, integrating my worth, and recognizing that I can be anything I want to be, but to try to align myself with authenticity. And that's been a really rocky road for me, especially as a younger man who's, deep into substances and deep into deflection and denial, and not wanting to do the work that I needed to do to self-actualize and to take responsibility for my life. So in recent years, I've recognized that is so unnecessary for me, because I'm amazing and I'm smart and I'm talented and I'm, not bad looking, I guess, for the most part. And those things are all part of our self-worth and our confidence and our charisma, and our, I would say, self-esteem is a big part of self-worth too. Being able to have the strength to tell yourself, like, hey man, like, that's not it. With that thing you're doing, it's not really good. And, let's look for a way to try to make that better, and really do the work and go through those uncomfortable moments, and be patient with yourself and gentle with yourself as you do that, and grow and change and bounce things off of people. If you have an unsavory part, like I have an unsavory part of my personality, I might go to Kylie and be like, hey man, what do you think about such and such? And Kylie, being the amazing person, be like, you're perfect, you're awesome, you're just great, because she's good like that. But then she'd be like, but you're kind of a dick too, so maybe work on that. I don't know, like maybe it works for you. I don't know, like.
I just like to call it as I see it.
You do. That's why you're great to bounce things off of.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on right there with self-worth is sort of, there's an easy way to feel like you're overly inflated, right? If you are really attached to your successes, or like the things that you think make you special or make you better than someone else. Like when we think, I want to say that everyone who's attached to their ego actually has a self-worth issue. But you can imagine, the superior ego, people who are like egotistical, who are maybe like we see this with like jocks, right? You know, jocks in sports, or like celebrities who are just full of themselves. Well, if you really want to look at that mechanistically, what they have is a need. Their worth is tied up in the condition that's within their lives. And if you took that condition away, they would lose all self-worth. To me, that's not true self-worth. True self-worth, existential self-worth, has to come from something greater than the conditions in your life. So it's something that no matter what the ebbs and flows of your life come and go, you know, the things change, your self-worth never fluctuates. It's steady and it's pure. And to me, that is a connection to that deeper aspect of yourself, the larger self, you know, the capital S self, not the small ego. And I think that that's really where the work is can you withdraw your sense of worth from the external things and hold it true for yourself before any of the conditions even come into your life. You know, like you're getting behind the conditions of your life and of your world. And I think that's like a key that really is important for understanding the concepts, you know, of self-worth and everything.
And I wonder if that was part of it too, that, you know, I maybe had great examples around me, but I wasn't ready to receive the truth of those things and recognize that I wanted to be in my, you know, my bubble, my imaginarium that I've created for myself. It's like I was just comfortable there, and you know, being able to step out of that, it's like, well, I'm vulnerable now because now I'm laid bare and people can see me, and I want to be seen. I mean, I want people to know who I am, but I also don't want to look flawed, and I don't want to look weak, and I had spent a lot of time in fear of just saying to people like, no. And now that doesn't work for me, or be able to say like, yeah, I really want that, but I have no idea how to get it. Can you help me?
Yeah, well, and
show me the way.
It's really interesting too with vulnerability, because resisting being vulnerable is actually a far more vulnerable position than owning your vulnerability.
Explain that. Tell me more about that.
If you're able to be soft and vulnerable, then you're actually invulnerable, because you aren't resisting this part of yourself that you're afraid is going to get hurt. You're actually okay with it. It's sort of like the idea of being okay with being not okay. Like if you're not okay and then you're okay with being not okay.
Yeah, we've talked about.
Are you okay or are you not okay? And it's a lot of okays in one sentence, but you get what I'm trying to say.
I got to stop you for a second, because I want to have better clarity on that. And I want to say that to be vulnerable, right? To open yourself and be vulnerable, you say you're invulnerable. I have a really hard time believing that that's true, because the ego tells me like, oh no, that's not safe. So you're obviously not safe because you're open and you're vulnerable.
From the perspective of the ego, that's absolutely true. Right. So that's the shift that happens.
It's funny because that's the first place my mind went to when you said that. I was like, oh, wait, that can't be true, because now you're open. And it's like, wait, now everything comes at you. It's like, but now you're actually being real. So whatever happens is supposed to happen, and that's for you. And you have to be able to accept those things and work through them, or whatever the case. And that's the hardest part for me. That really is being able to like step out. You think so?
No, for sure. Vulnerability is one of the hardest things, I think, for every single person to face.
Sure.
Seriously.
Yeah. I'm with you. Kylie, what do you think?
About vulnerability?
No, I mean, okay, well, yeah, sure. We'll start there, because I don't find you to be a type, I apologize for making a statement, but I think that you're certainly a very strong person, but I think you have a wonderful, tender side to you. And to some people that might look like vulnerability, but it's not. It's also maybe, do you think that you kind of are that way because you don't want to look vulnerable or something like that? Am I on the right track here?
I think that the way that I was kind of brought up, we were taught to really put on a facade and not express the reality of what was going on in our personal lives, unless it was like glorified to the camera. And vulnerability to me is extremely scary, because that means you're putting yourself in my view, in my eyes, it means you're putting yourself in a position where someone else potentially could harm you or do wrong to you. And that terrifies me. And allowing someone to see deep inside of you and like know like things about you that you might deem like bad, you know, oh, well, they're going to know I'm a bad person if they know this thing. And then whatever amount of good things I possess won't matter because this one bad thing or these several bad things, because the bad outweighs the good, even if that's not true.
But I think also built into that, I think, and maybe this is a good pretext to lay out before we get too far into self-worth and vulnerability, is that is understanding that fear doesn't really have a use. Now, when I say fear, I'm talking about the egoic fear. I'm not talking about common sense, right? So there's an idea of like, well, I need fear. Fear is what prevents me from putting my hand in the fire and getting burned because I'm afraid of the fire. And that's actually not true. Common sense prevents you from putting your hand in the fire. It's just a recognition that if I do this, this is the consequence. And so I don't want to do that. And so fear, it creates an excess resistance to the thing that could cause the negative thing that you don't want. But your fear to it blinds you from the reality of the situation. You're no longer seeing, oh, fire in hand would cause burning. Staying just next to the fire, I get to stay warm. Fear says I need to run as far away from the fire as possible, and I'm left freezing in the cold. And so there's an interesting interplay here. Now you're in the, say you're on the savannah and a lion comes out, the classic fight or flight response analogy, right? So that causes fear. Well, that's a kind of very physical, visceral fear that's just sort of like your body mobilizing resources. It's not the same as that emotional fear that lingers and that causes your mind to spiral down into thoughts forever and forever and just following into this self-destructive cycle that is not helping you or anyone else. You know what I mean? It's just reaffirming that small self within you that is powerless and afraid of all the external things. And that's where things like agoraphobia comes from, or the excess fear disorders, where patients will actually be afraid of going outside because they've built up all these different fears that have all spread from one thing to the next and just grown and grown and grown to the point where they're actually useless. So they're out in the cold when they could be standing next to the fire because they're so afraid that they can't see the situation clearly. They're so terrified of the possibility of something happening that they're unwilling to even test whether that's true or not.
You're talking about positive risk versus negative risk in a scenario that might otherwise help you grow. It's like putting yourself to the hazard to test yourself, I guess, is the way that I would put it. It's like, who do you want to be?
Investigate.
Curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity, investigate. So it's like the rope analogy we've talked about before. Is it a snake or is it a rope?
Yeah, I love that. It's so cool. When you said that, I was like, what? That makes so much sense. Like,
it's an old Buddhist fable or analogy or something like that, but it's true. And I think that goes with everything in life. It's never take it just at face value. Always investigate. Yeah. I think that's one of the most important things too. Like even when we're talking here, I would never want someone to just take things that we're saying at face value. I want them to listen to what we're saying, bring it in, consider it, and then the Buddha said, take what I say and be a scientist about it. Cut it, melt it, boil it, freeze it, shatter it with a hammer. Like do everything to it to understand what it is and see if it's real or see if it's not real. That completely prevents that false guru syndrome where people get sucked into cults and believe things because the guru said so. It's like that's not it at all. Like you have to be responsible for taking what there is, the information, the nugget of information, and like breaking it down and trying to understand it.
And I think that's great to say because I know we get heavy philosophical sometimes and we go deep, but it's also not meant to do that thing, as you just said. Like, we're not trying to indoctrinate anybody. We're just speaking from our experiences and we're discovering things together, and that's part of what this is about.
It's all about pointing. We're pointing to something. You look.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, this helped me. It could help you. Test it out. If it doesn't, let us know why, because we would love to hear something that's helped you. Otherwise,
So the thing with fear is that when it comes to vulnerability, when you're speaking about that, there's definitely a feeling of like, if you're in a physical situation where you feel vulnerable, then it's best to get yourself out of that situation because maybe you aren't safe. That's common sense, right? And maybe there's a fear reaction, but again, that's mobilizing physical resources. That's not the same thing as that fear that causes you to spiral into your ego. Yeah. So maybe we should say there's a primordial fear and an egoic fear, or separate the two in some way. I don't know. But so obviously there is a need for some sort of recognition that you don't just want to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But if you're resisting being vulnerable, then that's where your weakness is starting to show through. Who are you more inspired to? Who do you feel safer and more? Who do you feel stronger? The person who is trying to avoid or like tight and resistant to this possibility of some flaw within themselves, or the person who just outright says like, yeah, I got that flaw. I'm working on it. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, and I do this and I do that. They just know themselves. It's like you can trust that person because they're actually honest about it. And so maybe honesty comes into this conversation about vulnerability as well. And I
think honesty and love both kind of connect into the topic of like self-worth, especially because when you were talking earlier, you said something about not having conditions in that. And I think that is like the foundation of love is conditionless.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have.
Unconditional love,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's true, again, for all the virtues. We had episode 3, I believe, was about virtue. And we really talked about the different ones, you know, like courage and willingness, love. Trevor's was honesty, honor, yeah. And really, those should all be unconditional.
Yeah.
Unconditional love, unconditional bravery, unconditional honesty. And I think that's really important to note. And it goes back to that same idea, like you're just talking about, you know, it's deeper than the physical. It's not, worth is not gained from how much money I have or how many friends I have or X, Y, and Z. But we all believe that because we have obviously a physical existence. We came into a world with a society and a culture that has taught us that the physical is very, very real and the most important thing. And it takes undoing all of that conditioning to come back to that true sense of self. And that true sense of self is eternally, infinitely worthy. And that's within all of us. So anyone who wants to work on their self-worth, don't try to change the pieces of your conditional world around, right? Own the part of you that is already eternally worthy and become closer to that portion of you. Bridge that gap between you and yourself so that you are actually embodying your soul, being an embodied being, you know?
Yeah. I think that's where it's like hard, where in order to have worth that's worth owning, like you have to change, I know, terrible wording. You have to kind of like change something or shift some perspective, I guess. But
To me,
I'm losing what I
to
meant,
me the best
that resonated. Thank
the
you for
best
saying that.
way to change anything in your life is always through letting go and release.
Yeah.
If you go and you try to get out there and force it, right, then that's always going to, it might work in the short term, but it's a very short term thing. Your actual experience of the world and of life doesn't change at all, even if the condition changes. So it's like, well, it's worth asking, why do you want money, for example? Why do you want friends? Well, that's because it would allow you to feel a certain way. It would allow you to own a certain state or to believe something about yourself or about the world. Well, can't you give that to yourself now? Why do you have to wait for that thing to give it to you?
And I would say that, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
keep
struck me when you said that. It's like, I've never wanted friends. Never. But I need friends. I need my friends. I need them. And I never knew how much. And it's amazing. You know what I mean? To recognize that and to be able to feel worthy enough about my needs.
Well, and that's an interesting thing too, is like the ability to take care of yourself. And not only the ability, but you know, the willingness or the proclivity to take care of yourself, the tendency to. How if you have to always pay attention to taking care of yourself, it's not gonna last very long.
Yeah.
It should just be something that you naturally do because it's who you are, because you love yourself, right? If you truly love your cat, you know, you want to feed it, you want to clean its litter box, you want to groom it and cut its nails, you want to do all these things for it because it's just loving, right? You don't have to, I mean, of course, there's a certain amount of chore that you have to actually think about it, but it becomes so second nature because you've aligned your inner motivations with
And for
who
those
you
of you
actually
who have
are.
children,
That
you know,
applies.
that's deeper. But us parentless ones over here, we're talking about cats. Sorry.
Well, I would counter that with that we all are children, and we all are adults, but also that child, the inner child, needs care too, and there's love there, and that's part of it, and I think that adds a little flavor to that. But
Well, it goes along with what I was saying, which is like taking care of yourself. Well, really, what is that? It's having a true love for your inner child, where the work becomes effortless, truly, because you're not trying to do it. You're not trying to do it to prove something, to prove that you love yourself or something. You're doing it because it's just who you are, and that's the truth.
And it may start that way sometimes. You know, it definitely started that way with me. It's like, well, I recognize that I'm not doing this thing, and it is not serving me, and I am suffering because of it. So I had to make myself go in and do that work, and it was a real chore for me. It was really, really hard, and it was so uncomfortable, and just it lasted way longer than I wanted it to. But some of that is my resistance to knowing that I needed to do that.
Yeah, that you're worth giving yourself the effort. So something that you told me, like, when we first started dating was, like, could you take care of yourself like you take care of other people? Mm-hmm. Are you do you love yourself enough to take care of yourself like you take care of other people? And you would think, like,
And for
well.
context, Kylie is a very caring, loving person to everyone around her, to the point where sometimes it's like, hey, stop. Like, you're doing too much. You need to stop. Like, she just wants to take care of everyone. So the initial time that I said that to you, is because you have such a powerful outflowing towards other people. And the question is, not even a question, to me, it's obvious, plain as day, that as soon as you turn that inward and are able to actually get that to go inward, you're going to explode with power. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So that's that question. Can you actually love yourself like you were another person?
I really want to say yes, but the more I actually ask myself, I have a harder time saying yes, just because, again, that hard time being vulnerable, I still think I have that with myself sometimes. Like, I'm very open and expressive. I share what I share, and I am, like, super open. But vulnerability is not openness. I could tell you all the stories of my life. That doesn't mean I'm being vulnerable with you. Like, the things that I'm willing to share with people aren't necessarily that it's vulnerable. Like, I shared something with Paul probably last week that was just, like, super vulnerable. Tim was probably the only one who knows the depth of that. And I'm not super vulnerable in a lot of areas because vulnerability to me is different than openness. But when I ask myself if I'm worth taking care of like other people, I see so much like cringy, bad, like I've thought this or I've done this or I've, holding all this negativity for myself. And as I keep asking, I understand that that's just not grounded in truth. And so I'm learning to love and take care of myself, and I'm making slow progress, but I definitely really want advice on, and anything you guys have to share of how that looks. Like, what, when you look at someone on the streets or someone that you know and you're just like, that person respects themselves and takes care of themselves, and you can just tell. Like, what is that? What does that look like?
We'll add something quick before we get into that, but Kylie's nickname is Mother Earth. Because she's mom to us all in her own way, and we love that, and we cherish that. And I wanted to add that I feel very honored that you were open enough to share that thing with me last week, and I got a lot from that, and it was very healthy, that interaction that we have. And we have so many beautiful moments, but that aren't on camera because they're not for you.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. But when I see people taking care of themselves, it's inspiring to me, because I know that there's work there that I need to do too, and I think that it's more motivating than it is anything else for me. I'm like, that person's got it. I don't know what it is, but they have a light about them, and they're real, and it feels good. I love to see that. The more that I see that, the more I feel I can develop that sensation and that practice within me. And things have gotten better, but man, I have my days. We all have our days where we're just super tired and we're not feeling it, or we're in pain. And it's like, all right, what does self-care look like for me today? Do I force things, or do I take a step back, have a look at the big picture and say, okay, today I can rest because I know my body needs rest, or I need to eat better or drink more water, or I need to go for a walk and get fresh air, or I need to hold my girlfriend more and tell her I love her, like call someone I hadn't talked to in a long time. These things they're so different and so vast, and it can feel abysmal sometimes. Like, oh, I got all this work I need to do, or like that person made me feel some type of way because they're like crushing it, and I'm over here with my small self, like, oh man, I'm not really doing shit. You know what I mean? I feel like a piece of shit, but I'm not.
It's part of the unplugging from the conditions, and it's hard to do. So there's an actual idea that, we are actually like a chemical. We are bound to the conditions in our life, and to actually change those things, to pull back our emotional state and put that supreme over the condition, rather than needing the condition to be there in order to give us permission to feel a certain way. We have to break that chemical bond. That means we need to pour energy into that bond in order to break it, so that we can reclaim that energy for ourselves and then have it for our use.
Yes.
So it does take a lot of time and energy in order to unplug from your conditions. I think it
makes great sense. I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
I think one of the biggest resistances that people have towards self-care, which again, I think it really is one of the baseline, step one things to do for building self-worth, for being able to start building your own self-worth, is taking care of yourself. I think that one of the things that people trip over so much is that there's a natural inclination to believe that it's selfish for you to take care of yourself, because you could be using that energy to take care of someone else.
Yeah.
And of course, the ego is going to say this because the inferior ego, I should say, the ego that wants to say I'm smaller than everyone else, or that everyone cares, or the whole universe is out to get me, right? Well, like that's kind of like a convoluted, distorted high self-importance.
Let me ask you something. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I love this. Let me ask you something. When you're in that state of mind, you're in that vein where like I'm a piece of shit for not going and giving. You and I've had a conversation recently about like giving. You know what I mean? And you're a very giving person, and we love you for that. And I know that.
I second that.
Yeah, and I feel that we all, in our own way, embody that state of giving, and we all can feel depleted sometimes. And it really does help to have somebody on the outside say, "Hey, I see you, and I love you, and you're amazing, but remember yourself." And it helps to like kickstart that thought process in our head. It's like, oh fuck, man, you're right. Like I hadn't thought about it, you know. And I need that too. Like, we all need that. Like I know Kylie needs motivation for it. I need motivation for it, and it's very easy for me to just want to shower the people I care about, which is love, and just like, yes, everything I have is for you, you know. But it's can be that, but you also have to make time for yourself, and I think that's so important, and people just forget to do that. They get rolling and they're like, oh man, because it feels good to give, right? It feels good to like, oh, thank you so much for that. I'm like, oh, you're welcome, man. I'm so happy for you. But also, is that egoic?
Well, the question,
or is that
I think,
aligned with humility, true humility.
I think it depends on your intention
Sure.
and where you're coming from in that.
What do you-
and
what, like,
so where
giving
I
without
fall
thought of
into,
reward, right?
like, well, yeah. Where I fall into, where I love people. I think people are the greatest, and I think everyone's perfect all the time until I like don't. You know?
which is a dangerous trap too, because
Yeah, of
if you
course.
can't see the flaws in others, then you're going to be always comparing yourself in an impossible
Exactly.
paradigm. Yeah.
But if you're like, so I love to give all the love I can. I love to pour onto people and give everything, like way too much. But when I'm doing that, I'm forgetting that, oh, I exist too. I'm a human being who needs that support and love too, and I'm not saving anything for myself. I didn't spend any time alone. Zero time like with myself, getting to know myself, because that was scary, because that meant vulnerability with myself. That meant like, oh, I actually like, oh, sit alone with myself. Would I have a conversation with myself? Hell no. I don't want to talk to myself. I don't want to get to know who I am. I'm going to pour everything I am into other people. And doing that is so damaging if you aren't aligned. Like it can just spiral really quickly.
Well, see, the underlying emotion in that is guilt.
Yes.
There's a sense of inner guilt that I did something wrong existentially, and I have to prove that I'm not guilty and overcome that.
Yeah.
And so I think the bigger thing about all this, it's the outer effects of the guilt are worth noting, because you can trace that trail back to that root. So that's like one of the most important things about doing the inner work. Is you trace it back to the root, and you work on the root. You don't work on the stuff that's superfluous, like the superficial stuff. Go down to the smallest thing. And that is a sense of guilt.
Ooh.
And so that sense of guilt is the inner smallness that okay, there's a lot that I want to unpack here. So
Please
just
do.
take this ride with me real quick. So guilt.
Buckling in.
Buckling in. So that the energy field of guilt, which I think is true, is apparent in all of us. I think we all have some sense of guilt. Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this plane. I think this plane is truly about working through guilt. Guilt can only come from seeing yourself as wrong or bad. And whether or not we want to think that, whether or not you believe in God, for example, or any sort of spirit, Allah, whatever it is, any sort of deity, you're holding a space in your mind for some authoritarian figure that judges you positively or negatively. And that's true even if you're an atheist, you still have that.
Yeah.
You still have that section of your brain that sees authority of some sort and that is judging me. And maybe it's just yourself. And I would actually argue that it actually is yourself on the deepest level. And so the question is, if you're playing in the paradigm of guilt and innocence, then you're playing through the paradigm of judgment. And you'll catch yourself, because if you are a very guilty person, subtly you will also judge other people. There's a constant judgment going on. You're playing the game of that's either right or it's wrong. And it's a hard line, right or wrong. You're either evil or you're good. I can't even think about how that person could ever do that because they're evil, right? You immediately block it out. Projection of the shadow. No willingness to look at it. Softening the judgment for others and for yourself means that you can still do things that are incorrect without making it wrong, right? And that's discernment versus judgment. you can discern the things that are correct to do or incorrect to do without turning it into the emotional and moral judgment that comes from those things. And so I think when we're talking about self-worth and how guilt is at the core of low self-worth, because you see yourself as wrong and in punishment and needing to overcome some probably ineffable thing, intangible thing, something you could never actually pinpoint that you actually did wrong. It's just this energy field that you have conditioned, and every single day you wake up in it and you fall asleep in it on a subtle level. And so it's not about trying to prove your worth in the world in order to exist. It's about looking at that energy field of guilt and deciding, do I want to keep doing this or not? And it takes courage because, well, who are you? Who are you to not feel guilty, right? That's selfish. That's the selfishness that people feel. You have to take that step and say, even though I'm feeling that, like, who am I? I'm small. I can't own a higher self-worth. Letting that go completely and saying, I'm going to love myself without cause. I'm going to trust myself without cause. I'm going to have high worth without cause. It's unconditional. There are no conditions attached to it. You're owning that state. And of course, you have to keep an eye out because the ego is going to want to come in and just act cocky like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. Like, I'm just practicing my self-worth. And it's like,
cheap.
That's cheap. That's not it. So it's like, you have to be very alert. You have to stay aware of your inner workings, but you'll know when you're doing it right because it's scary. And then when you do it, it feels big. It opens and it feels very nice. It's good for everyone. Yeah, it's very exciting when that happens.
Other people get to share that too, you know?
Exactly.
I think that's...
Which is why it's not selfish. It's actually not selfish.
That's like this, we've talked about selfish that's actually important and valuable, and that selfish is taking care of yourself and setting boundaries. And when you are taking care of yourself properly and you're giving yourself all the things that you just said, you know, then other people are able to share that, and not only like share the honest, like just pure goodness of what you're possessing and caring for yourself. You get to give that to other people in just like such a more pure way. Because like if you're constantly giving to other people and you're pouring from your empty cup, it's empty compassion, it's empty empathy, and it's so cheap, and it doesn't last, and it doesn't help either one in that transaction. You're playing with Monopoly money here. You're not going to go very far, exactly. You know? It's just so much more valuable and I mean, so much more pure to be the one filling your own cup and knowing when your cup is full and then letting people partake from it. Instead of, oh, my cup's empty, but here's some imaginary wine. Here you go. Let's get placebo drunk. And it just...
Well, even if there's still a concept here that I think is worth bringing up, which is that even if it is you're doing something good for someone else while you're depleting yourself, you're actually not improving the net goodness in the world, because you're actually taking more from yourself than you're giving to someone else.
Yeah.
And so I think that all of our goals should be to strive to reduce suffering for everyone and increase the goodness for everyone, and that means yourself included. So if you're partaking in an action that is negative for self but positive for someone else, you have to check whether is the net positive or is the net negative, because you might actually really be straining yourself in a way that you don't need and only helping someone a tiny little bit, and you're actually creating more negativity in the world even though you think you're doing something positive. And so obviously what we want to do is the win-win. It's not about win-lose, right? It's about win-win. We want to try to find stuff that not only fills us but fills everyone else around us, and ideally do that in a way where we just become the type of person who does that, so that we're not thinking about it. We're not trying to do effort or trying to do it for a reason. We're just doing it for its own sake, right?
Yeah, you take the mantle of accountability upon the goodness that you want to perpetuate in your life. And it does come from within. It is an expression of real love. And, you know, it's easy to create an island for yourself and exist on that island. And you might have everything you need on that island, but it's just you. And that's a very lonely place to be. And I've been there. And I always think about, like, all right, when I start like crawling back to my island, I just want to grab that fucker and slam it down in the water and let all that good that I want to give to myself out into the world, and just let that ripple just go everywhere. and let everyone else ride that wave, man. You know, because I maybe created that wave, but it's still mine, but it's also ours, and it's not just for me. And that's so important to remember. That like love, man, it can't be that simple. People want to fucking fight that fact. I was watching Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. Shout out Hot Boxing Mike Tyson, and they mentioned that in their podcast that it couldn't be that simple. People feel like they can't be loved and they can't give love because I'm a piece of shit or I feel terrible about myself, and that's might be true in that moment, but that's not always true.
Truth is I would say truth is always simple, completely simple. When you get more complex, you're actually moving a little bit away from truth. You know, there's a Bruce Lee quote that says, in the beginning, when I worked on a punch, it was just a punch. But then I learned about the mechanics, how my elbow had to be, how my body weight had to shift, how my knuckles had to make impact. And it became this complex thing. But then once I became a master at it, the punch just became a punch again. I didn't think about any of those things. And so there's a necessary phase to go through, a gate. You have to walk through the gate of complexity, but truth is simple. The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls. It's all around us. It's simple. It's here. The question is, are you actually perceiving it the way that you should perceive it? You know, like not should, but the way that is actually in alignment with the truth of reality.
And I do believe that can be different for everybody. I think it's fair to say that we get there.
Of course, that's the beauty of the diversity of our world, yeah.
Yes, Tim.
And when you're describing that as making the wave and riding your own wave and letting other people ride it, well, if you're in this community of people who are all open and all loving and all creating their waves, and you're riding their waves and they're riding yours, and everyone's just creating it for the joy of doing it, isn't that just an interplay of beauty and fun and love? And isn't that what life really is supposed to be about? Doesn't that supply the greatest meaning to life?
And where does that start?
With yourself.
With yourself.
Exactly.
Right here. And here. And maybe there.
Are you worthy enough to be the one to allow yourself to be the epicenter of joy, the epicenter of goodness, that by nature of the epicenter, you are the core of it, right? The sun is hotter than all the layers around the sun. The core of the sun is the hottest. Can you be that core, that heat that emanates so much to everyone? Or are you the black hole who tries to suck it away from other people? Let's try to take it because you have an emptiness.
People who, so in personal experience, when I pour out so much, I kind of depend on other people to fulfill the needs that I'm not fulfilling for myself. And when other people can't fulfill that, I just, it sucks and it's rough and woe is me and it's small.
You're in the cold wilderness.
Yeah.
Because it's scarcity.
But I'll still keep pouring out, you know, I'll still keep pouring. But like when I'm learning now and what I kind of really want to deepen into and implement is, I'm losing it. Sorry, I lost it.
It's beautiful. I love that.
No, it was there.
It's okay.
You want to ground in and implement, you know, the self-worth or caring about other people, wanting to connect to, you know, the abundant state of mind, being the one who's the sun who's giving.
Well, I know that I have a brightness about me. People tell me that all the time, and I understand and I receive that compliment. But then there's still that truth right now that I'm facing of, okay, but you're not really owning your worth and you're not taking care of yourself and you're not doing the things that you need to do that are just like, I mean, take care of yourself like you take care of your pet. You know, it's like, it comes back to that simplicity of if you can give into yourself what you want to pour out, you'll have an even give and take, like not dependent on other people for that refill or that balance, because I feel like I felt so dependent on, like I get really needy, and I find myself just like wanting validation from someone else, external validation, and if I don't get that, then I fall into like, oh man, I'm just terrible, like, no, I didn't get any validation today. I must be the worst person. And when I'm pouring out constantly, I'll get small little blips of, oh my gosh, you're so sweet. And that's what I'm like, okay, yeah, that filled me up a little bit. And that's what I use to pour out again. Like these small little cheap things that fill me, but they don't actually. And I think that I'm really finally recognizing like the cheapness of that. And
Well, I think part of the beginning of the journey is always the hardest, right? Because you have to shake off the rust. You know, like the engine starts moving again and all that rust comes off and it's like, it's uncomfortable at first. But once the engine starts going, it's easy.
Yeah.
Getting your foot in the door, that's the hard part. As soon as the door's cracked, it's easier to push it open. So there's a momentum conversation here, right? And things move more smoothly once you've gained momentum.
I think to add to that, I have a question and I also have a statement.
Okay.
I'll start with a statement. I think that you and I share a similar facet of our upbringing, that we were raised by people who are very codependent. And do you think
Yeah.
that this personality trait is carried over from the symptom of that part of your upbringing, where it has afforded you that thing where it's like, well, if I'm not doing good for somebody else and I'm not receiving compliments from somebody else, well, then I must be doing something wrong, or that I'm not.
That's good phrasing.
Like I'm not a good person. Does that make sense?
I
at all?
do feel that. It's
Okay.
definitely a part of it, but I also I want to take my own responsibility for
Now
what
you
I've
do.
kind of
Now you do.
created.
Yeah.
And say that I allowed that to really become bigger than it should have been, and not should have been, because it is. So I allowed, yes, I learned that, but I wasn't able or willing or wanting to see that there was a different way. And even like, I mean, I've known about taking care of yourself like your pet or like someone else for a long time. And
Intellectually. But experientially is the hard part. The embodiment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, okay, no, this is actually like this, it matters now, and you kind of like, you got to stop playing that game. So I would say yes and no.
Cool.
Second answer.
No, I get it. I just see that. I see that the way that you talk about that last excerpt it just kind of hit me hard, because I know where it's so easy to fall back into those codependent patterns, and I'm not sure that this correlates with the acceptance of self-worth or the work that needs to be done to get ourselves to a place where we feel worthy. And I think that it can manifest in a codependent way because we're trying to please others so much, and it's like, well, why are we pleasing others? Because we want to feel good about ourselves. But that's the cheap thing you were just talking about,
Exactly.
right? And that's the kind of the habitual pattern of codependency, where we get into that thing where it's like, well, if I'm not making my parents happy, then I'm not a good person, and I need to be thinking about like my authorities that are over me and making sure that they're happy, and then when they're happy, then I can relax. But then, oh wait, I can't relax because I don't know how to feel comfortable in my own fucking skin, because all I do is try to please others.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you're just crawling all the time with this anxiety. You know what I mean? I get it.
Yeah.
I fucking feel it, man. I understand. I'm not that way anymore, and it was a long, hard road to get to a point where I recognize it. But I also noticed too, where sometimes when I'm around the right individual, the right family member, I'll use a family member, not a specific one, that it kind of shifts over again, and I'm like, oh, it's all about them all the time, and I'm depleted. I feel like I've allowed that barrier to fall down, and I let my boundary go, and I didn't stand my ground and take care of myself in that moment. And it has less to do with what they're doing, and it's everything to do with the decision I made to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
I allowed that to happen. So it's so hard for me to accept that, because I'm so used to thinking, oh, I got to care for them, I got to care for them, I got to care for them. No, that's not it. Self, then others.
So yes, and
It sounds selfish, but
And
it's really
ultimately, if you want to move out of that kind of situation, you have to just decide that you're going to take up that responsibility, right? You're going to decide, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
You can wait as long as you want for the other person to change, and maybe you'll get lucky, maybe they'll change. And again, nothing really about your internal experience of the world is really going to change. You know what I mean? Like, you have to do the work
you
yourself.
still have to live with yourself.
Right, exactly. But like, eventually you just come to a place of saying, like, I don't need you to be different for me to be happy.
Yeah.
I'm going to change
Exactly.
that.
There
Yeah.
you go.
And in the
I love
same
that.
vein, like if you're waiting and doing all this like effort and putting all this out there for someone else to feel happy, and they're not feeling happy, like maybe you trying to take that from them is taking away from them learning a lesson.
Exactly.
And that's like, you know, and again, like we've said that before, but I'm like, oh, aha. Like,
Internalizing
oh, it makes sense now.
The ahas are so beautiful. That's the shift. That's a real
Yeah,
shift.
that's
a
where
real
you can
shift.
implement it. And
a
it's
real
like, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
I don't just intellectually know this in the background that I could quote it to somebody, but like, this makes sense to my life. But if you're so caught up in trying to make your life about oh, I'll be happy when this person's happy. It's like, you know, maybe that person just needs some space to manage what they're going through, and they're going through something that they have to learn something from. If I maintain my peace of mind and my happiness and my self-worth, they're going to come back to me when they've learned that lesson, and we're only going to move up. Like, I'm here, maybe they're here, or maybe vice versa, and then, like, that person learns a lesson and they come up here to meet me. And then we get to go up a level together because we've just, like, met in the space of, like, honesty. Not in, I need to make you feel better, you need to feel better so I can feel better. Because that's so needy
That's
and so
codependency.
conditioned. That's not loving. That's not honest. It's not true. It is super codependent.
When you laugh, the whole world laughs with you. When you cry alone. And that's a hard phrase to
cry a
consider. It's a hard phrase to consider, but there's a truth to this where you separate yourself when you're in those states. And so someone who is separating themselves can't hear what you have to say anyway.
Yeah.
There's also like scripture that talks about how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it's because it's about state of mind. It's about what are you willing to allow yourself to receive. And it's not even about some magical thing about like, oh, like I'll follow through with the money thing. It's like, it's not just money just going to pour into my experience magically. It's, will I care about myself enough to perform the actions that actually change the way that my monetary situation is? Will I allow myself to receive brilliant ideas? Am I worthy enough to receive brilliant ideas that will actually change the entire course of my financial situation? You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's not just about it. I think that's really the core of all of it, is like you're receiving these thoughts. You receive these thoughts and these energies that are so important for your evolution. And the question is, are you willing to receive them or not? You can share with someone else that, you know, here, again, giving your gift freely, but not requiring them to take it. If they can't take your gift, then you have to let them have their day in the wallows, right? They have to stay in the dark for a little while longer.
And also don't go into debt for that gift, energetically speaking.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a great analogy that we could probably expand on further. Don't go into debt.
That came to me recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, energetic debt. We all want to spend before we have, and it's well, how do you have it in the first place?
I'm broke, bitches.
Yeah, but how do you have it in the first place? You give it to yourself. If you're spending when you aren't giving it to yourself, then you're just creating a hole.
Oh.
I think that it's certainly easy to break this particular thing down in a way monetarily, right? Like we all have our chips, you know, we're all playing this game like.
And when talking about worth, it actually is a really good analogy, because worth, money, right? Wealth. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it all correlates.
I've never played poker, but I'll try to keep
We
up.
all have our chips.
You'd be awesome at it. You'd be awesome at it.
We all have our chips. We're all playing. Continue.
Yeah. We all have our chips. We're all playing a game. And you have to know when to pull up stakes with some people, with some situations. And you have to know when to buy in. Double down. You know, play your cards. We all get a certain cards in our life. People forget. You can change the deck. You can change the deck anytime you want. You can throw the cards off the table, wipe the slate clean, start fresh. That's what you need to do sometimes. And this is what we're talking about with self-worth. When we get so caught into the traps like, oh, I need to fix this thing. I need to fix this thing. Well, maybe this thing that I've put so much value on does not carry as much worth over into my integrity and into my self-worth as I think it does. I'm so married to the idea of having this thing, whatever that thing is, a personality trait, a monetary thing, or a physical thing, or, you know, or peace, whatever, but release, right? We talk about release. Let it go. Let it go. Don't hold on to it. Don't try to possess it, because that's a violent act. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting the thing. You're
cheapening the thing.
Cheapening the thing.
By
All
possessing
of that.
Yeah, you're turning it into an extension of your identity and self-worth rather than the rich thing that it is on its own. You can't actually appreciate the colors and the taste and the feel of anything because it's only a 1 or a 0 in your book. Does it add to my self-identity or does it take away from my self-identity? That's it.
If you're dealing with things purely contractually like that, then you're missing a wonderful beauty of life where you can still appreciate things. And I'm going to use an analogy that you told me, and I love this analogy, is where it's like, okay, you see a beautiful garden of flowers. Well, do you go over and pick the flowers and have them for a short period of time and they die? Or do you appreciate the flowers and walk on and let somebody else come and appreciate the flowers? That's kind of what we're talking about a little bit here. It's like we're expanding ourselves, we're growing our garden bigger, and we're trying to create something, you know, and that, I don't know, self-worth maybe has something to do with that.
Yeah, it does. So like, I think the original conversation around that was sort of about like receiving compliments. And so when someone wants to compliment you, can you appreciate the compliment? Like a lot of people will either pluck the flower of the compliment and say, this is mine, I am this thing, right? Or they'll be like, I just can't receive it. I can't even appreciate the flower at all and completely block it. Well, can't you just appreciate it but not take it in as part of your self-worth? If you do that, it actually becomes a part of who you are on an energetic level. You start to, because you're affirming it without attaching to it and making it yours, you become that more. You're actually owning that ability within yourself, and then you're going to get 10 times more compliments for the exact same thing because you have become that, rather than clinging to, I need you to compliment me on this thing because that's going to validate how I see myself.
Married to the idea of it, married to what we think we need or what we think we know.
Yeah.
Instead of taking a step back and having to look around and saying, well, maybe I don't know a goddamn thing. And maybe I need to just open up and just let the universe show me what I need.
Yeah.
Show me the work that I need to do is more the thing that I would use, because I'm so ready for that. Like, I think we, in our little community, man, we're like so hungry for like, man, give it to me straight. Like, I want it, like good, bad, ugly, man, just fucking rock me. Like, I want to be rocked because I need those aha moments. And then I'm not always like looking where the aha moment's going to come from because I'm fucking addicted to it. You know what I mean? Like an addict. Like, oh, where is it? Oh, is it coming? Is it right over? Oh, where is? Oh, I missed it. Fuck! You know, and I'm all like bent out of shape. That's not it at all. It's just like, all right, I'm still.
Yeah.
Be still. Let me have it. If it's not for me, cool. It's all good. We're gonna release that, and we're gonna keep going our direction we need to go.
Yeah. And that is a phase in the spiritual journey where people seek to get high by releasing things.
Oh yeah.
And the best thing to get past that is, can you actually give up the high when you're in it? Can you give up the high?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, let's use drugs as an example. You have a drug and you get high, and then it starts to go away, and you start to feel like you want more of it or something like that. It's like that you think, oh, that's the time to let go of it so that, you know, you don't continue this cycle. That's true. Could you let go of it when you're high, when you're in the elated state? Because if you do that, you're completely removing yourself from that cycle of gain and loss, that dualistic cycle of needing that external condition. Instead, you get to appreciate it as it comes and then let it go when it's time for it to leave.
It also kind of gives you a power in it.
Oh, for sure.
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
That's the core of it, yeah.
So you're not releasing your power into that. You're not becoming helpless to that substance or that thing.
The substance in the spiritual work being, you know, like the transcendental moments, right? Which, you know, people get stuck in the psychedelic trap, I think, a lot. And not that psychedelics can't be an awesome tool and that they aren't fun, but if you're attached to using psychedelics, you know, overly attached to it, like that's where you get like acid heads, right? People get really spacey and weird. It's sort of like you're relying on the tool too much. The tool is just a tool. If it's not actually serving you, then you're serving it. And that means you're giving your power away, right? You're not free. You're a slave.
Master yourself.
Master of self. Yeah.
But also, I think that I want to add a little asterisk to that, because I am big on that, like working on myself and like, okay, I'm not going to control my emotions, but it's not control like put it in a box. It's not mastery like, oh, everything in its place. I've mastered that, so now it's done. It's like, no, this is a fluid, liquid thing, and I want, like, to use Bruce Lee again, be water. Pour water in a cup, it becomes a cup. You put it in a teapot, it becomes a teapot.
Yes.
Water can flow, it can crash, and to appreciate your life in that way, that all of this is changing. All of us are changing. Everything is going away. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It means that it's beautiful, because life is amazing in that way. And self-worth is that very thing. It's like we feel worthy, but it's more now.
Is the water harmed?
No, water's just water.
So if the water thinks it's a cup, and then it gets poured into the ocean, then if it thinks it's that cup, that's going to be painful. It's losing its self identity, but it hasn't changed. It's just become part of the ocean, right?
But if
but
the
the
water is
ocean
the
is
water and you pour it into the ocean, then it's expanded so much.
Right.
It's just gained a whole ocean. Like, you know, whoa.
Is the ocean a single entity? I would say absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's
both, actually.
An accumulation of entities.
Yeah.
You know, there's like the ocean is our existence in so many ways. I don't want to get too cosmic about it, but you know, without the ocean, nothing goes. You know, think about it. It's like,
of course, yeah. I mean, I think that the analogy works so great because, again, it's the spirit or soul, however we want to identify, the awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to say, is sort of trapped in this vesicle, whatever. Vesicle.
I love that word.
And we believe that we are it. And so anything that happens to it, we believe is happening to us. But really, it's just happening to the container. It's just the container that we are in. It doesn't mean you go jump in front of a train because you don't care about your container. It means you worship your container as the temple, right? It's something amazing, but you don't believe that you are the temple. The temple is just the container that you're abiding in for the 60, 70, 80 years that we're here.
Mm. And so many
or
things
longer.
are,
I'm going to live till 110, so.
easily.
Yeah.
Easily. And by that time, the medical science is going to
Yeah,
be
I'll be
amazing.
120 by the time I die. Yeah.
And I will add a little something to that too. I don't care to live that long. I'm not interested. Only because and this is a small thing, and I want to say this because it's honest. I don't believe that I have the mental stamina to live a very long life. And I say that, and it sounds self-deprecating, but it's not. I recognized early on that I didn't feel the need for that. But I also maybe have changed that perspective just a little bit too as time has gone on. Like I kind of flow back and forth from like, oh man, it'd be cool to be like 85 and still getting it and playing golf and, living life and traveling and doing whatever. But then it's like, man, I'm 85, dude. I'm gonna be in so much fucking pain.
No.
So
I'm gonna be like
So I will say-
a miserable old man.
I will say that
Probably
there are a
pretty
lot of assumptions you're taking with that.
Oh yeah. I mean,
And
it's
so-
way out of alignment. I realize I have a lot of
Sure,
work
yeah.
to do
So,
on that. But
so I
there's
actually
no
agree with
question.
you. I actually agree with you in the sense that I think there's a lot of people who are sort of in the camp of I want to live as long as possible. I
Sure.
want, like clinging to life. And if you're clinging to life, that means you're not recognizing that death's actually beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
They actually call death the big orgasm, right? It's like the big release.
I just want that DMT. I think it's the only one I'm going to get.
Find you some other ways.
Thanks, buddy. Help. I'm kidding. But seriously.
Now you maybe lose my train of thought.
We're talking about being able to release possession of the idea that
right.
you would live forever or live a very long life.
But to assume that you would decay as you age, or to assume that you would be the exact same as you are now, and you're just going to repeat that for decades, that is terrible, right? That's torture.
Oh, yeah.
But if you can release those assumptions, and maybe life has that in store for you, maybe it doesn't. Only time will tell. Only your inner power and each of our inner powers of what we can actually manifest will become apparent to us as we continue on our journeys, which of course have to do with releasing the need for the power and the need for life. But if we continue on, we could be 100 years old and still be fit. Those people exist.
Yeah,
100 years old and still learning things, still learning everything.
Watch us.
I'm also a type of, I love that. It's amazing. And I 100% agree that those things can be had and attainable. I think that I'm also not married to the idea of leaving any real legacy behind. I don't have any children. Not that children are necessary to leave a legacy behind, but that doesn't mean that my genes aren't carried on in some capacity. My brother has children. I have nieces and nephews, and they're all going to have children, I'm assuming. And for me, I just was never interested in the concept of it. I thought that I would use my time, that I would go out young, flying in hard on my side, crash and burn, burn bright, die fast, that kind of thing. And I guess that wasn't in my cards. So it's been hard for me to reconcile this, and knowing that I still believe in some way that I don't have the mental stamina to be an old man, to live that life and to carry on that long. I wrestle with that a lot still.
Well, what do you think that you wouldn't have the mental stamina to face being an old person?
I just think that it has nothing to do with like looking a certain way. I'll put that out there first, because I know people
I
like
wasn't even
vanity.
thinking
And,
about that.
No, I just
Yeah.
want to like kind of check the boxes with that, but I don't think it has anything to do with vanity so much as it has to do with. I guess I would just really love to go out like a cool way as a young person who maybe doesn't necessarily want to see old age.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I just don't find it to be as romantic as some people may think it is, and I'm not necessarily interested in being an old man who maybe won't be as fit or as well as I would like to think I would be.
Okay.
And I think some of that is the perspective of that is like, what I do for a living is part of my body, and I intend to do this the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I know that if I care for myself well, I can still have, virility, and I can still have health in my old age, hopefully, but none of that is known. And I think that I am not really been able to reconcile the fact that that could be a possibility yet. It's a way of me to kind of like try to control my life. I think that's what it comes down to. It's like I want to control how I go or what happens in my life, you know?
So I guess I always kind of thought I was either going to die super young or super old. And like now at a ripe age of 23, you know, well seasoned here. No,
Marinated at least.
I never really thought about my life as an old person. I just always assumed I would die young. I just had an assumption.
Why was that?
Another topic, another time.
Cool. All right. I dig it.
And now I am just open for, not in an oblivious way, not in a way that's like, oh, I'm invincible, but like, you know, I'm gonna die when I'm gonna die. Okay, well, if that's when I'm 90 or 80 or 60, maybe 120, like I hope to live to, it doesn't matter. Like, as long as, and I don't think that I'm going to face this every day. I'm not going to every single day make sure it's like, this is the day, like I lived this day exactly like I wished it would be last. Ideally, I would love that. You know, I would love to live every single day like, yeah, I would be happy if I died today because I feel like I accomplished what I was meant to accomplish.
Well, there was someone who tried to do that for like a week. They actually like they tried to convince themselves that they were going to die the next day.
Die?
And, no.
Oh.
But they went out and lived life like it was their last day. And basically it was like, there's no continuity in that. It's actually not a great way to live every single life like it's your last.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't go accomplish the things you want to accomplish in life. Of course you do. But it means that there's obviously something good about knowing that, hey, there's likely going to be a tomorrow and I can plan ahead and I can have some future that I can.
And the thing is, like,
but not be attached to it. That's the key.
Yeah. When you die, you die. You can't help that. You're just going to die one day. But if you're able to face that and say, like, maybe I live way longer than I expected or kind of even hoped to. There's going to be so many things that change in your life between now and the day that you die. Like, there's always going to be something new to learn. There's always going to be something new to just enjoy and be part of. Like that saying right now you wouldn't want to live till your 80s, like, you don't know. You could change your mind in 2 weeks.
And well, that's the thing. Like 5 years ago, were you the same person? And I'm not speaking to you, but any of us. 5 years ago, were we the same person? 10 years ago, could we have ever predicted that life was going to look like it does now? So then 20, 30, 40, 80 years from now, could we ever truly know? Like, we don't know what it's going to be like. It's just an idea in our minds. And so to get lost in thinking that idea is real and that it's not just a superfluous abstraction of reality that the mind's made up and that we're attached to, and that we could make real if we believe in it, right? We could make it real. If we don't actually think that that's actually how reality is going to be, then there's openness. We can always experience that it could actually look a lot different than we think. You know, most people who have some sort of like anxiety about an event that's going to come, it's this idea, this strugglesome, tight, electric idea in their mind of how it's going to be, how anxious it's going to be. And then they actually get in the situation, and the reality of the situation is nothing like they thought it was in their mind. Nothing at all. It's just completely a fabrication that the mind plays. And if you're living your life like that, you're constantly living in a fabricated reality of your mind, missing what's actually right here, right now, what's happening. And then you're on your deathbed looking back, being like, where'd my life go? I was always looking for the next thing. I was always somewhere else. Why wasn't I where I was, you know?
Now I'm vastly different than I was even 2 years ago in some respects. You know, it's also, and my intention was to seek truth in my life, change the things about myself that I want to change, be open to criticisms, and learn how to discard the things that are unnecessary in my life. But I also struggle with leveling up on certain things in business, and that's probably the biggest sticking point in my life, is knowing that this is a great topic on self-worth too, because I think that one of the reasons why I haven't done some of the things I needed to do with the business, meaning that I haven't grown the business in a way that is conducive to change, that it's me in a sticking point with my self-worth. Maybe there's a side of me that doesn't feel worthy of that. You know, it's less about me thinking I can do it because it's obviously been seen that I can grow a business and be successful. But to take it to the next level, do I feel worthy of that? I'm not really sure I do. And maybe that's why it hasn't happened yet. Maybe there's work there I need to dive into and have a look at. And I think that's very honest.
I think it's very honest, and I think it's an awesome thing to consider and contemplate and think on. And I would say that
out of me. I would not have thought about that otherwise, I think.
That's amazing.
I think that you get to one day understand and receive the fact that you are worthy of that. And my words mean nothing. Don't take them.
Don't say
no, they don't. But it's true. Like, you are worthy of that, and I hope that you own that for yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. What
So,
were you saying?
I think
I'm sorry.
I think that
Okay.
the shift has to come from first starting at the thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's true for everything, for anyone who is listening, thinking about their own self-worth. You can't now. I'll give another asterisk on this. You can go out and just force yourself to do the action, and then that action might sort of prime the pump and like allow you to think better thoughts about yourself, and then that might create more behavior that creates something better, and then it goes like that. But this cycle between the inner and the outer, that's always happening. We have complete control over the inner.
Yes.
And not immediate control, because there's momentum. So obviously we can't just drop things. Maybe in the most enlightened state we could just completely drop it. But in our current egoic conditioning, there's stuff that we have to work through. And we have to sit through and say, why is it here? And like, okay, I have to like go through this energy a little bit more and kind of ask those questions and have those growth things. That's part of the journey. But as we can't control what's out there. So what we have power over is in here. And so if we start to change the thoughts that we think, and through meditation, we don't identify with the thoughts, we allow enough space around the thought that something new can come in, right? Instead of just thinking, oh, like, this is who I am, this is how I've always been, I want to create this, but that's not in alignment with who I see I am, but I don't even see who I am, because there's no space around it at all. If I can provide a little bit of distance and actually look at who do I think I am, this is the same thing about looking at yourself as if you were someone else. If you can look at yourself as someone else, there's distance, there's some space. Now you can see it more clearly because you're not in it. You're not in the container, you're outside of the container looking at it. If you can understand yourself better on that level, you start to understand why you choose things. Why it is that when this happens, you react that way. When you wake up in the morning, there's a gnawing feeling at you that just, says this or that. And then you believe it without even a second thought. Giving that space and that awareness is the most powerful thing for change, because you're allowing new thoughts into your reality. If you have any belief that your thoughts have something to do with the way your experience of life manifests and the things that happen to you in your life, then you probably want to pay attention to the things that you're thinking. And I would go further and say that actions are actually just materialized thought. That thought, just like a muscle can't contract until a certain electrical potential has been reached, a certain amount of threshold of electricity has come to the muscle, and then the contraction happens, the all or nothing principle. In the same way, thoughts are just thoughts, electrical energy, but once they gain enough momentum, they pop into your reality as action. And I've had the experience so many times of watching myself doing things without any effort at all, just being like, wow, I'm doing this right now, and watching how this thing that I've always wanted to happen or to manifest and to do just pops into my experience without any work on my part, because the work had been done beforehand. The thoughts had been aligned to allow myself to receive this gift from the universe. And sure, my body still did the thing, like my words still came out of my mouth, but it wasn't me doing it, right? I allowed it to be done through me, and then it just happened. And so I think that's the alignment that we're all looking for, is to be the conduit, to be the vessel. If we think that we are the ones who are doing it all, it's a very tiresome, grueling, effortful existence. If we can allow ourselves to be the ones who are being done through by something more powerful than us, which is actually still us. Yeah. It's not separate from us. It actually is us. Then the release from that, and the allowance, and the flow, and the smoothness, the balance and harmony with nature and connection to the whole, all of it is perfect, and it comes out as true goodness, not just superficial goodness. It comes from a true, deep depth of goodness. I think that's the embodiment that we're all looking for. Clearing our channel. Clearing our channel. That's really what we're doing.
I love all of that. I don't have anything to add to that. Shit, man. I mean, I definitely have been in flow states many times. And even years before I even knew what a flow state was. I kind of looked at that. I was like, oh, this is just something that I do sometimes. But it turns out that it's actually a state you can put yourself in. It's actually something that you can attain and not necessarily have readily available to you, but maybe that's the work being done too. Is like, okay, I want to be so open and aware and ready to be the conduit of this thought and let my body be the vessel of which it carries the thought to reality. And I think that's amazing. That's amazing. And I man, yeah.
It's the question of,
awesome.
so the question then becomes, can you get out of your own way?
Oh, brother.
And when we're talking about self-worth,
Have you seen me try to move this?
when we're talking about self-worth, that is really core to this conversation, because if you don't feel worthy enough, you're going to block yourself. So it's way different, right? So there's the idea of, I need to create this in order for it to happen, versus it's already happening. I'm blocking it from happening.
Yeah.
And so the release of that, it's the same thing as the Buddhist or the Hindu analogy of the sun is always shining, the clouds come in and obscure it. When it's a cloudy day, the sun didn't stop shining, it's still shining, it's just being obscured. And so in the same way, we are always shining when things are always coming to us, beautiful things, everything we want is coming to us. But based on our conditioning and the habitual thoughts we think on a daily basis, the energy that we identify with and believe that is me, we block the reception of those things coming to us. So the question I think we should all ask ourselves is, can you let it be done for you? And again, that doesn't mean that your body doesn't do it. It doesn't mean that you don't still think the thoughts, but it's happening through you rather than you doing it. And it's a shift, a paradigm shift for sure. And I think it gets you out of your mind, and a lot of barriers are going to come up. Well, how could you be good enough to let yourself receive something so great? Well, that's why you're blocking it, because you don't believe that you're good enough to receive it.
You don't feel worthy enough.
Can you be worthy without cause to receive something great, which actually ends up benefiting everyone around you?
Fucking Ray, man. I love that.
It's a good question to ask yourself when you're struggling too.
Yeah. So I actually did a video on this recently too, and the practice that I've been using on the past few weeks in my meditations is, my animal mind, when I'm in meditation, wants to grab onto thoughts and problems and wants to chew on them and it wants to work through things. And so just like a dog who's chewing on a stick in the park that it shouldn't be chewing on, I say, leave it. You go, leave it. And he goes, okay. He drops the stick. He looks at me for a second. Leave it. Okay. And then I kind of sit back into that piece of silence. And then I feel it start to want to pick up another stick, and I go, leave it. And he goes, okay. And he stops again. And after doing that so much, just like a dog, the conditioning of your mind becomes trained. Don't pick up the thoughts and chew on them endlessly. You're only going to pick up the thoughts that I want you to pick up. You're not doing it just mindlessly by default.
Yeah.
We're doing this intentionally. We're doing this on purpose, right? It's not just happening because...
Doing the work.
And that's the
Putting it into
work.
practice.
Well, so when you talked about master yourself, and we had a good conversation about really one of the core tenets of the podcast, being mastery of yourself. And I think that is perfectly in alignment with that idea of control of your mind, and not control in the tight sense, but control in the sense of not letting the instrument use you, making sure that you are the master of the instrument. And that means purification, purifying your mind of all those tendencies that it's been conditioned into. It's taught, you ring the bell and the dog salivates immediately, the Pavlov dog scenario. And it's like that conditioning is causing so many problems in our life. We can recondition ourselves to be whoever we want. We can recondition ourselves to be successful, to wake up and immediately want to stretch and want to work out. And we can condition ourselves that good food that's healthy for us actually tastes good. We want that, right? We don't even want the junk food anymore. And I think we're mostly at that place too, where the really junky food, it's like we don't even want that because it doesn't make us feel good. But
when I'm training, I crave good food.
Exactly.
My body wants good food. I want salad.
Your body feels good doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want vitamins and I want healthy good food. I do. Everyone loves a good junk food, but I noticed that I'm looking at that and I'm like, that might make me feel good here, but it's gonna make me feel like shit here.
Yeah.
My body needs sustenance. Like the body needs sustenance, and that sustenance that you're talking about is the training.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're feeding and sharpening that tool, which the mind is a tool, the body's a vessel. You know what I mean? So it's certainly easy to get caught in the trap of, I just want to like please that animal. You know what I mean? I just want to, okay, yeah, play with the stick, chew it up. I mean, you're just an animal. What do you know? You know what I mean? It's okay. You're innocent because you're an animal. No, you intend to do the work that affords you a better life. So you don't pick the stick up. You put the stick down. Watch the show. We're here to learn. We're here to be intentional about this. And we want to be better people. And we're worthy of those things. We need those things. We don't even recognize how much we do sometimes. And it's hard to get past that.
And the desire for eating healthy foods in that case is an owning of your worth. You care about yourself too much to eat the shitty food. Because you care about the future selves that are going to experience the downside of that little pleasurable food that you
And it's been interesting too, because, you know, I've only had a couple of training sessions with you, and it's like I used to lift all the time. It was just commonplace in my life, constantly. It was just into it. And I noticed now, older and getting back into it, and then lifting, I felt great, but then I went and did something else that I love to do, which is play golf, and I fucked my back up. And it's like, oh, why did I do that? Well, maybe it's because I stopped training. Maybe it's because I stopped eating so good. Maybe it's because I wasn't practicing like my normal routine of stretching and doing all the things that are intentional so that I can be as effective as I want to be. I didn't feel worthy of those things. Didn't understand that that was part of the process. I didn't do the work. So it led me to injury. It was a really good wake-up call for me.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the point. There's nothing wrong with failure.
Nothing wrong with it. It's great.
It's the teacher, right? So you have to fail in order to learn. So.
I'm not pissed about it.
Yeah,
I'm actually kind of thrilled. It showed me exactly where I'm at. I needed to know.
And that's how you know that you're growing, because if you're thrilled about seeing a failure and getting to grow from it, then growth is inevitable. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It's not going to not happen.
Yes, Tim.
It's only when you resist it and collapse and identify as the poor little me who made the mistake and I can't. That's attachment.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's just the conversations like, hey, I feel a certain way and I need to care for myself in a certain way so that when I do come back to this, I cannot continually re-injure myself. You know what I mean? And there's an intention there, and I recognize that as I've gotten older, and I've let myself go a little bit in that way. That okay, this is going to take longer than I thought it was going to take. That's fine. It's totally fine. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to make that happen. If I got to take more time, I take more time, and just be okay with some shit. You know, be gentle with yourself. You're not a piece of shit for being a little bit older and a little bit out of shape. Guess what? You have infinite possibilities. Look how far you can go now. Look how much work you're able to do, and what luck. What luck to be alive and to be aware of that, and also recognize that that's good, and there is a goal here, and that you're still healthy enough to do it, and it's going to be great. You know, and you're going to come up. You're already getting better. Just within 2 weeks, I'm already stronger. I'm already smarter, and I already feel better. Even though I was in pain, I'm like, this is so good. Oh no, it wasn't like that. I was like, oh, this sucks, but I'm not going to be this way forever. Have faith in the process. Yeah,
the joy comes from that constant betterment, not from needing to achieve that external thing, that goal. And then even bad stuff looks great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the way to live. That's really what enlightenment is to recognize beauty in both the positive and the negative.
Give me the struggle that I have created for myself. Show me what I need. That's my medicine.
Yeah.
I'm here to take the medicine. I'm ready. You know what I mean? I'm not going to like it, but it's okay. I'm going to love it when I get through it.
Exactly. All right. I think we're probably about a little over an hour. Do you guys have anything last minute stuff that comes to mind, or any loose ends that we didn't touch on that you want to tie up?
I don't know. I think that was a really beautiful start to maybe a continuing conversation as time goes on. We can probably find our way back to this in some way possible. I mean, we do carry over some conversations from other podcasts, and I think that self-worth might be a continuing theme moving forward in some capacity. We'll probably hash it out, maybe not as expansive as we have, but I feel like there's just so much to talk about.
Of course, yeah.
You know, and we don't want to like beat everybody's ears up for hours and hours doing it.
Well, and I think an important thing to recognize with the kind of stuff that we talk about is it's not informational and educational in the sense that you're gaining new pieces of information and storing them away in your like, little squirrel hibernating all your nuts, like taking all the little information. It's like, this is a reminder. I'll pick up books, spiritual books that I've read a million times because I want to connect to that energy again and just be reminded of that truth that I already know. Because nothing that's really true is something outside of what you already know. You know it. We all know it deep down. It's just that reminder and that release of like, oh, that's right. I don't need to be tight and living this superficial, false identified self. There's actually there's something real here that I've always known was true. You know, like Simba, like remember who you are. Like it's always there with you, even when you forget it. And so connecting with this information is really just about reminding yourself who you are, reminding yourself the truths of life that you're never really disconnected from. You just kind of get astray and you kind of forget them a little bit.
And it's interesting that we were able to talk about aha moments, and I actually had one sitting here tonight talking
I
about.
had like 2.
You had there you go. So that's why we do this, right? This is what this is for.
The podcast is the container.
Yeah,
Well, we're
man.
not
Yeah,
just
man.
like spewing like here's aha moments we had, which we do, but it's like, oh, we're having them. Oh, this is woo.
It's
I'm getting
evident.
this information and knowledge right now in the moment.
That's the fun, yeah.
Purity of it.
That's the fun, yeah.
For sure. For
Just
sure.
our
Well, guys,
conversations.
thank you all so much. It's been lovely having this conversation with my 2 beautiful friends, Tim and Kylie, and we're looking forward to having many, many more conversations, and who knows what we'll come up with in the future. But as always, thank you so much from us at Fireside Wisdom. We love you guys, and comment, like, and subscribe, please. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear your feedback. If you have any questions, if you have anything you want to add, or if you want to go ahead and just rant, blow the page up, we'd love to hear what you have to say. And thanks again from us, and have a great night.
See ya.